All right, I think we are right on the hour. So hello, everyone. My name is Kai, and I'm the CEO of SWOOP Analytics. And I'm really delighted to have together today several of my colleagues and then two very special people representing organizations that have done exceptionally well in our global Microsoft Teams benchmarking. So we have about an hour today, maybe a little less, depending on how it goes. We have a busy agenda, but there's also time for conversation. So first of all, welcome and introductions. That's what we're doing right now. And I'm actually just going to show you who the people are. So I'm going to flick between these two a little bit. We have the highlight reports presented by Dr. Laurie Lockley, who's our chief scientist here at SWOOP, and who's going to take you through sort of the top level findings. And if you haven't downloaded the report already, well, what are you waiting for? We're going to show you a QR code towards the end where you can grab it. And then Sharon is going to talk to us about some of the amazing case studies that came out of these absolutely top performing teams. And we have two of those with us today. We have Marcella and Jaap, who's going to talk through what they've done, which is very inspiring. And I think it's something that is inspiring and insightful at the same time. So I can't wait for us to let them tell their stories. I've also got with me today, Jeff. Can you wave your hand, Jeff? Jeff is our head of customer success for Europe. So if any of you have got questions after this, then Jeff and I will be here in the Central European time zone to talk to you. Jeff and I will also be looking after the chat today. So if you've got any questions along the way, any comments, thoughts, or feedback, then just chat away and we'll hope to keep it as active as we can. Actually, what would be really nice if you can start by introducing yourselves in the chat so we can see who's here. And if there's anything in particular you'd like to hear at any point in time, yeah, just interrupt us in the chat, and then Jeff and I will look for that, and then we'll pass your question on to our wonderful presenters, or we'll just get you to unmute and then you can ask yourself. So just back to the agenda. We are basically ready to go, and I am going to hand over to Laurie to take us through the highlight findings from the report. Over to you, Laurie.
Thanks, Kai. So this is our second Microsoft Teams benchmarking report. I think we've done 4 or 5 Yammer ones. We like to call our reports the world's largest studies because they are. But really, that's more an artifact of the way that we do our benchmarking, our analysis. We actually monitor what people are actually doing. We don't use surveys to get our insights. We look at what people are actually doing. So if you think about, I think at the moment you've got the Euro Cup and the soccer, and I watch the NBA finals. When they're looking at elite teams, they're actually measuring what people are actually doing. So there's a lot of statistics and support for supporting elite teams. We believe that's the same sort of thing that we should be doing for business teams. So we analysed 33 organisations who had nearly 100,000 teams, 320,000 staff we reviewed. Now, just to put that in a little bit of context with a survey, when Gallup runs its worldwide polls, they look at about 200,000 people. So we're even bigger than that. And then from that list of 100,000, we actually whittled it down to 273 what we call elite super teams, using the algorithms that we've actually designed over the last few years. And it's those teams that we actually visited the actual people, some of the people in those teams. As you probably understand, our benchmarking is totally anonymous, so we don't know what the names of the teams are or any of the members or what have you. We have to go back to the organisations with the team ID, and then they tell us who the team is, and it's often a surprise to them as well as to us. So it is a journey of discovery, and thankfully, our algorithms are working particularly well because all of the teams that we identified as high performing were indeed very high performing and really quite inspiring. But we'll hear more about that later. We looked at a period over a 3-month period, so quite an extensive period, up to the end of February, right in the middle of the COVID period. And of course, and of course, then we took the deep dive into the data. Kai, could you just move to the next slide? So it's probably no surprise that what people are using mainly in Teams is the telephony functions that we found with Skype for Business, so calls, chats, meetings. Probably did surprise us, though, the extent with which they were just using those telephony functions. So on average, nearly 90% of the people were only using those functions. In other words, not using anything like the full richness of the Teams product and platform. In fact, not even working in a digital team. They're simply using what they would have used with Skype. 28 times as many chat messages as team channel messages. So you can see there's quite a bias towards that telephony use. And of course, we see that's a big problem, because a lot of the real value in using the Teams platform is actually in the digital teaming and where you can share content and applications and so forth. So part of our benchmarking base, we had 7 companies that were both subject matter experts and subjects for this study. So and we've got one of those on the call today in OrangeTrail. So, and they were all unanimous. You don't work in chat. You need to work in the channels, in the team channels. So this is a big opportunity. We see that's probably the main finding that we've come from the whole report, that there's a lost opportunity here that we, that we really need to take advantage of. We also heard that email was going down. So people were saying that, yeah, well, we're actually using chat a lot more now, so that, we're using less email. That's good, isn't it? And we say, well, it is good in a way, because it means that people tend to react to chat more than they do with email. So in terms of getting your attention, chat seems to work better than email. But, unfortunately, what we found was 98% of chats are just one-on-one, right? So at least in email, you can actually speak with more than one person, but largely if you're replacing email with just one-on-one chat, you are missing the opportunity to share. And more importantly, email is now used as a system of record. If you give up that and start putting it in chat isn't a system record. If you come back and look in a week's time, you're unlikely to find what you had in chat. So it's quite temporary. So whilst it's good in a way, it can be bad if we don't manage it properly. And finally, I guess the activity in Teams is not surprising. Of course, the overall activity went up. I think Microsoft were talking about 600% in the first month of COVID. Now we know that was mostly in the telephony functions. The other main narrative that's going around from that is that as people have worked from home, they're really getting overloaded, they're getting stressed, they're getting zoomed out was one of the terms that was used. Let's just go to the next slide, Kai. But when we actually look at the data, we find that that's not really the case. So this plot is just showing a histogram of on average, how many chat messages people were making a day, and you can see that over half of the sample that we looked at here, we're only sending between 1 and 10 chat messages. That's not overloading. Of course, if you look down at the tail, there's certainly people sending hundreds of chat messages a day. And of course, they're very busy, of course, but then they're getting the publicity, if you like. But certainly we see this same pattern with meetings and calls as well, so we didn't see that when you look across the whole organization. Just the next slide, Kai. And we wanted to drill a little bit more into looking at this whole issue of stress. And we're following one of a researcher, a neuroscientist called Paul Zak. His sort of research had shown that there was 2 sorts of stress. There's something called challenge stress, which is good stress. It's sort of the stress that when you're really being productive and delivering, you're feeling a challenge stress. The bad stress is the chronic stress, where it can be quite debilitating. Now, Zach's sort of proposition was that if you're working in a trustful environment, then you're more likely to be experiencing challenge stress. If you're not in a trusting environment, then it's likely to be chronic stress. So we took something like 12,000 people and we measured the degree with which their interactions were reciprocated as a proxy for trust, and that's the horizontal axis. And on the vertical axis, we looked at how many of these people were actually reaching out to, how big were their networks. And you can see the ones at the top right had networks over 400 people in this 3-month period. And the size of the bubbles was just how interactive they were. So you can see that the ones in the top right were actually very interactive, highly reciprocal, and with big networks. And we actually managed to interview some of these people. And indeed, we did find that they were actually quite motivated. They didn't feel chronically stressed at all. They were in fact quite energized. They felt quite energized. You will see there are some on the left-hand side. And what we found, we didn't interview any of those, but we found that some of the position descriptions we had, because we didn't obviously have their names or anything like that, they tended to be middle managers of operational groups. So think about something like a call center manager that might be physically co-located with the team, but when the team went home and then continued to do their work, they no longer had contact with that team, and the team weren't looking for their supervision either. So anyway, there's a chapter on this. I think it's quite fascinating, but I think we're debunking, I guess, the myth that people are totally stressed by this sort of digital. I mean, there's clearly some people that are, but we don't think the majority are at all. So next slide, please, Kai. So when we do look at the teams, when we said that most people are using telephony, that's not to say that they haven't tried to form digital teams. In fact, we found nearly 100,000 across only 33 organisations. So you can see that there's a lot of people that have tried to form teams, but we found that only 97% of those weren't really using the Teams platform in any real productive sort of way. If you just go to the next slide, Kai. So I just want to give you a little bit of an insight at the sample that we had. So if you look at the bar charts on the left, top left, you can see that we've got 99,354 teams, so nearly 100,000 teams across the 33 organisations. But when we looked at the activity that was happening in those teams during the 3-month period that we analysed, only just under 26,000 teams had any activity at all. So clearly, there were teams that were either dead or not doing anything. Some of them might be quite justified. They may have been project teams and the project was over. But clearly there's a lot of teams that had no activity, and I'm sure that's the case on a lot of your sites as well. But we also took those teams that were active and then we applied a filter to it. We said, well, let's look at the teams that have at least 3 active members and they have at least 1 interaction per day. So that's a pretty low bar, right? And when we did apply that to the active teams, then we're down to something like 2,700 teams, down from 25,000. So I guess that tells you a little bit about, how many sort of pretty much dead teams there are in the platform at the moment, sort of. So then we've got this 2,700 teams. We think, well, let's look at the top 10% of those. So that was 273 teams, and those are the ones that we analysed in detail. We found the organisations that were most represented in that 273, and we reached out to them. We reached out to them and said, well, you've got X number of teams in this thing. Here are the list. Can you tell us anything about these teams? Now, on the short list, the bar chart on the bottom right, you can see the one on the left of that. That's the sort of breakup of the types of teams that we found in the short list. So that's the 2,700. And you can see that we've classified them as self-directed teams. That's the aspirational team type. Communities, which are also a good type, probably belong more in Yammer, but nevertheless they tend to be like self-directed teams that have grown bigger. Forums, which are basically Q&A type forums, or they may be actually formal organisational departments. And also the single leader team, which can be quite a true team as well, where the team has largely been driven by an individual. And that's all classified by our algorithms that we've been doing for a number of years now. Interestingly, when we look at the top 10%, the 273, and we apply the same algorithms, sort of, I think it is 96% or 96% of those are actually classified as self-directed, So this is telling us that the algorithms are doing the right thing, that they are identifying what the research tells us are highly productive teams. Okay, so if we can go back to the next slide. So high performing teams. So as I said, we looked at some of those in detail. We interviewed some of the members of those. I think if we had time, we could have gone through the full 270, and we would have come up with 270 inspiring stories. So Typically what we found was that they were very operationally focused. They interacted every day consistently, heavily. They were self-directed, which means that they're all connected to each other in a reciprocated way without a stand-up out single leader. Typically they had between 3 and 8 members, so the bigger the team gets, the harder it is to be cohesive. So that sort of makes sense as well. Also, when we compared the sort of teams that we had with last year's, we might go to the next slide, Kai. We found that last year there was largely nearly an equal number of self-directed and single leader teams, and there was a bigger number of communities and forums. So this was pre-COVID. But in COVID, when people were actually seriously using them, we saw that the self-directed team had gone up to nearly 40% of the sample, and a much bigger sample, I might say. So we can see that people are starting to use the platform as it should be used. Still too many big teams, I might say. So, people still need to get the handle on what a right-sized team is, and we think it's certainly less than 10, and certainly the research tells us that. So, let's go on to the next slide, Kai. So with that, I think I'll hand over to Sharon now, because this is the interesting part where you start to hear about what these elite teams really look like. So over to you, Sharon.
Thank you very much, Laurie. Well, firstly, I'm going to pass the ball, handball back to Kai, who's our CEO, because Kai has some awards to hand out.
I am so excited to have Marcella and Jaap representing the two organizations, and we actually have. I know it's COVID times and everything is virtual, but believe it or not, we have made real awards for you. So it won't just be a virtual thing on a screen share, and they're being printed right now and put in nice frames and being sent to you. So you have a real physical artifact, in these COVID times. Isn't that amazing?
Excellent.
It's excellent. You can put it up on that wonderful wall behind you. Yeah, it goes right there. And because it is truly amazing, and I think it's really worth. And as Sharon will, as we go into what you guys have done, I just love how it's all about how you're working together. Oftentimes, as all those of you on the call, that sometimes we can get too caught up with the technology. Can we run a PowerShell script to integrate this system with that system, and suddenly it becomes a technology project to roll out or get teams to function. And what I love about the story is that you can tell us is how you are actually working together. So huge congratulations to you for have made it into that, I guess, making through that cutoff point that Laurie's articulate. You can see it's you are doing things that are truly amazing. So thank you, and congratulations. And let's hear, Sharon, let's hear what these guys have been up to.
Absolutely. And now I'm stalling again. We are going to hear from them, but I was going to go through some of the other teams as well. Can you move to the next slide, please, Kai? So in the report, if you haven't downloaded it, I've put the link to it in the chat here, but we've got 11 case studies, and it's quite an eclectic mix, as you can see here. We've got companies, you guys may have heard of Chaucer. They're they're headquartered in the UK, a global consulting company. They actually had the #1 team out of the 100,000. We're doing another webinar next week where they'll be speaking about that, it's a really interesting team. Actually, Jeff, can you share the link in the chat to this case study on Humana as well? They have a team, their top team, I think it was #4 out of the 100,000. Really interesting story, because it was a geographically dispersed team. They've never met face to face, and yet they've created all this trust on a digital space. Really interesting, and they're actually cross-managing their teams below them as well. So this #4 team was actually the team managers, and they're cross-managing everyone below them. There's, New Zealand Post here, which was this great team that they formed just leading into Christmas last year, where they literally track the parcels for Christmas mail delivery. So all of these stories are actually in the report. But let's hear from one of our top teams. Now, Marcella, I hope I get this right if I pronounce it right. Your company, it's an Italian regional government that Marcella is working for. And am I right? Regione Emilia Romagna. Can you pronounce it for me, please?
That's Regione Emilia Romagna.
Oh, much better.
Wonderful. Much better. Thank you. Excuse my ignorance. So Marcella's team was actually in the top 0.15% of the 100,000. So right up there. And we found it speaking with Marcella and also Daniela, who I know is on the call as well. It's actually a team where you produce all your internal all company news for what was it, 4,000 employees, Marcella?
Yeah, that's 4,000 plus employees, yes.
Yeah, so
local government, yeah.
Yeah, can you start just by, let's introduce, maybe tell us a little bit about RER, what the organisation is, and then can you tell me about your team ORMA, which was your top performing team in our benchmarking?
Okay, as you say, we are a local government, so it's more to those who live outside. Italy is a local state, not as much as Germany, but closer to that. So we have an assembly, political assembly, and the government in itself. So there's 4,000 plus people working for it. We are 4 million people living in Regione Emilia Romagna. My team basically follows the internet. So it's an internet. I call it an internet dream team because we're really very close together. We've been working together for years. Well, at least Danielle and I. There's new people coming in. Some goes out, but the core is always has been same people for quite a long time now. So what we do, Daniela does the news. Daniela and Massimiliano are the two journalists. I'm a web editor. I call myself a jack of all trades because that's what an editor does. From basically what I do is try to write in plain English. In this case, would be plain Italian, but you get the gist. Because of course, as government and bureaucracy, they still tend to speak in a different language. There's no way. So what we do is rewrite. Well, managing the internet means technical too, but mostly that's what we do. So there are kind of two areas, so the news and the rest, as I say. But we do definitely work back to back. That's why the team is so close. There can be one without the other. So that's why we always we were a very close team before, and the Microsoft Teams just made it easier. But I think that the reason we are so good is I feel like
we're saying you are good. You are good. We've got the data to prove that you're good.
Well, after reading all the stories in the benchmark, I really feel like a fraud. But anyway, the reason we are so active, is because definitely we work. We must work together. Because for every news there's a page, so there's definitely a need to be constantly updated all together.
Yeah,
so
and I know.
We do.
Yeah, Daniela, when I was speaking with her as well, who's the journalist that you mentioned earlier, who's also on the call. Hi, Daniela. She was saying that in the past, she would literally be knocking on the editor's or the boss's door. But of course, Italy, initially when the pandemic hit, Italy was one of the worst hit countries. You were in lockdown for a long, long time. So you had to work in teams. And you did. Well, actually, can you explain to me, Marcella, how it looked with your team's channels? Actually, on this screenshot that Kai shared, we've got some examples there of just your team channels. So you were really throwing around. I can see this one on the left. You've even got like photos and things like that. So you were sharing, I guess, and working out loud, collaborating on teams.
Yes.
Whereas if you had been in the office, you would have done this face to face.
Okay, maybe. No,
Yeah.
because basically we've been on team way before the pandemic. We've been using Microsoft Teams since 2017, more or less. So okay, we were already used to. The big difference that we didn't go in the office, but basically lots of things were already done on Microsoft Teams. So what you're actually showing here is, yeah, Daniela was asking, what do we use for our news? What piece of it was a piece of news, I think, and we were actually voting which one photo was the best to use for that particular news. On the right, I think there's a discussion on another one. So what we were supposed to do with that piece of news, I think, I can't swear it's dead, but I can't read it, but more or less that's what we do. So there's a discussion on what we on today program for the internet. What is if there's an emergency news we have to talk about, where to put it in the internet. Of course, there are news, so something is more newsworthy than something else, and then usually there's a discussion with the people who ask for the piece of news who say, no, mine is more important than yours. News. And there's usually the bigger discussion or on comments, on the thread of comments that there are on the internet. Of course, an internet of a local government is a social network, so we need to be careful on the comments, what to publish, what is the tone of the comment, is the right tone, is it uplifting enough, or is it just lashing out? I mean, we are people. We work for the government, we're still people, so there might be someone lashing without realizing it. So, or maybe we need to cut the thread of comments because it's too long. So the important one get lost. The important comments, which is maybe an answer to a question to somebody else asked, get lost. So that's the kind of discussion we do on Teams. Sometimes they are synchronous because maybe I'm working like on something different, or I'm talking here to you. So maybe Massimiliano is writing something on the Teams and I'm working on that later. Or quite often they are also synchronous because we are there. So we're really using all the range of possibilities the Teams offers. So that's what basically our day-to-day work. Plus there's of course some programming, but as in programming. Sorry.
I was just going to say, from a business point of view then, even within your team, you were saying there's quite a lot of discussion and people have different opinions about things. So having that on a Teams channel, I guess there's always, a thread there that anyone who comes in, when a decision's been made, especially I guess if it's a controversial decision, any of the politicians or anyone who may question that, you could actually, from a business point of view, show them, well, this is the discussion we had, this is the information. Whereas, if that's done just in a room without, without that working out loud, I guess you don't have the trail to follow. So,
basically, we do have a lot of data, yes. to shore up our decision, yes. Even if on that side, Microsoft Teams is not, in a way, it's what Laurie was saying before. Talking about one-on-one, there's lots of data. So finding those data is not well organized. Is not, if there's not a kind of architecture behind, can be problematic. So that's something I would suggest everyone to do. Organized. Think of Teams in a way you would think of a website with the information architecture in your mind. Because you then have to find what you're looking for, and it's not definitely easy. That's why channel is really important too.
Yeah, and you have quite a defined governance on your channels, at least for the ORMA team, don't you? So you have, can you explain that, your general channel, and then you have some specific channels
we
to
have
working?
specific channel. Yeah, I think everyone. Well, I hope everyone does, because basically, okay, general is lots of conversation, but then we have a channel for the news, because of course it's a separate area. We have a channel for, well, also some private channel for, I'm going out. I won't be here today. So the team is always constantly updated on who's in both on Teams and on the work. We have a team on the channel on data. So say, guys, there's some data here that you think you need to look, for example, analytics data, or even SWOOP's analytics data that I think are important to everybody is involved in. We have kind of a channel dedicated to what can I say? We have a meeting. Well, we moved from one weekly meeting to more like a stand-up everyday kind of meeting. Even if we are not in IT, we decided to shorten the time of weekly meetings and make a short meeting every day for half an hour in the morning. Okay, that's the program from today. We expect to have this news, and this news. We expect this problem, or nothing to say today. Okay, that's gone. So there's kind of minutes of that in that channel. So even if you, like today, I won't be there, I can go back and see what is the program and what they discuss, what needs my attention, this kind of things. So yeah, the channel are very, very definite, and that really needs to be done. Otherwise, that's with the amount of discussion and interaction that we do, it would be basically impossible to look for anything, because sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I thought it was really interesting how you said you actually even have a channel where you say, I'm going to be out for lunch for an hour or so.
Yes.
And we've spoken to a lot of the partners, and Jaap was one of them. He'll probably touch on this, that the importance of that is, if that was just done in chat to one person and someone else in the team is looking for you, they can't find you. Whereas if there's a channel for that, everyone can be very transparent about where they are and if they're available or not.
I think that's really important, because basically we are a team. I mean, it's not Microsoft Teams. We were a team before. We are a team. We will be a team with or without the technology. So everybody needs to know that today, if anything happens, I won't be there. Okay, so they probably need to ask somebody else in IT to come in and help. Okay, or even if I'm, programming your holiday times, so there won't be any, holes in and when I'm not there, so somebody can cover for me, or simply, okay, basically even simply, okay, guys, I'm switching out. I'll be here. Mobile is on. But I'm reading the SWOOPs was benchmarking today, so I need to read that, please. I'm not. You don't say me. It seems I will be inactive, but I'll be there. So even this is important, because otherwise they say, okay, she's not there. Maybe she's going for coffee or something like that. Well, I'm there. If you need me, I will be there. But let me give me time to read.
Yeah.
Okay, so
well, I love your priorities too. Reading the SWOOP benchmarking report.
So that's actually, I can show it. It's real. I wasn't joking.
I love it. Marcella, actually, just when you're talking about SWOOP though, when I spoke with you, you were saying it was really interesting. You obviously, we've got the data to prove that your team Orma is one of the top performing teams in the world. However, you thought that there was going to be a little bit more of that across the whole government, and the data actually revealed. Well, can you share with us what the data revealed?
Okay, yes. At the beginning, I was a little bit disappointed, because I did expect, this big pandemic, it did break, or I hope to, did break the the mold. Maybe we are collaborating more. And when I went to SWOOPs and realized that what we did is basically copy on Teams what we always did. So
in the workplace.
And the workplace.
So you were moving your bad habits that were in the office onto a digital team.
Okay.
Right.
On the other side, after talking to you, when we all talked together, I realized that maybe I needed to think about, okay, that's a pandemic. Of course, that's what we did. We recreated the structure of the organization within teams. Okay, so probably what needs to be done is clean all of those data and just take the real teams and see what that tells me. Because otherwise, I've looked all the data, and of course, I basically agree with everything Laurie say. We have community of practice, which is something that is pretty logical. We have some forums that became forums because the pandemic hit, so everybody needed a place where to ask. So, for example, the remote working team, we wish. It worked. It started like a way to keep together people who from all over the organization who working on that. We're working from home, and we're the first people who did that. When pandemic hit, that was bloated to biblical proportion because everybody got into their teams. So from a community practice definitely became a forum, but that's what we needed then. Okay, that's obvious. Yeah. What we need, a place where people could ask, okay, what do I do, or what happens next? So that's pretty logical. And it's all logical, the fact that my boss, the HR boss, decided to, okay, everybody, I will create a team that is for all the HR area, and so everybody's into that. Of course, there's not a lot of collaboration in that because it's a single one, it's a single leader team because basically it talks and we interact a little bit, and that's logical. What we need to do is clean up all those teams, there weren't really teams, and go back to the beginning and see where the real teams are and see if there's any collaboration in that, because otherwise I'll suicide because of course
no, don't do that,
it's a single silos, HR that deals with HR and all the HR people, IT that will only talk to IT. So I need to go back and see all the teams that the real teams basically, because I know they are there. There's simply there's such a deluge of data that I need to clean that. But yes, at the beginning, my first reaction was, oh no, we are doing the same things.
This is a perfect segue. Marcella's actually agreed to share her screen of SWOOP for Teams, and this is actually the real team ORMA that Marcella's been talking about. And I'm just going to get Kai to talk through what to look for. So this is when you're using SWOOP, and this is the measurements to look for to know that these are the high performing teams. So Kai, it hasn't screen shared yet, Marcella. Could you?
Yeah, actually, Marcella can talk to this because I know she knows it, but it's just not to put her on the spot, so I'll do it.
Okay, just give me a minute.
Yeah. Okay. And perfect.
So this is the famous or infamous, I'm not sure, Team ORMA, and it's kind of, but when Laurie was talking at the beginning about these, getting it from 100,000 down to these about 3,070 to 2,700, and then looking at those absolute top elite teams and what constitutes these self-directed teams, it's kind of interesting that they had really an active member size of somewhere between 3 and 8 people, and you have exactly that. You have 8 people, right. You can see there, and over on the right hand side, the interactive users is 8 out of 8, right? And that's what we would expect from a team. If you're on the team, you're supposed to be there. So that doesn't mean that you can't have teams being used for a department where you might have 200 people, but they would never get to the numbers that that team almost get into, because the bigger the team becomes, it's simply a matter of math. The less cohesive the team can be. You cannot have interactions between, maintain relationship between 200 people the way you can between 8 people. So, and the fact is that, high trust.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Kelly. I just wanted to say that yes, if we watch the department team, we move back down from 100 to 60%, which is basically
Yeah, you just can't have it. And if you scroll down a little bit on the screen, that team persona that Laurie was talking about, do you remember he was talking about there were communities, there were forums, there were self-directed teams, and then that ideal team team type was a self-directed team. And as the iconic sort of representation of it shows, it's like everyone talks to everyone. And if you look at the network map over on the left-hand side, if you scroll up just a tiny bit, you can really see how dynamic those interactions are with the team members. And a lot of those lines are full lines. The broken lines represent relationships that are not one that are one way, and all the full lines are two-way relationships. So there's heaps of these two-way relationships. Actually, there's 91% of the interactions are in these two-way relationships. So that's where we really talk to each other. That's just absolutely amazing. So these are just some of the numbers that really shows that this is a high-performing team. And of course, the really cool thing is that you then able, at least those organizations that are lucky enough to have SWOOP Analytics, can go in and find these other self-directed teams, so we can draw out these fantastic stories like the one from the Alma team. You'll also see, if we scroll down a little bit, that Team Alma is really good at mentioning, and they're asking questions. The asking questions you see over on the left-hand side is represented by the curiosity index. You'll actually see little goal points in SWOOP, little goal markers, and that shows it's based on the global benchmarking that we say, well, this is what the top best performing teams can achieve. And not surprisingly, Team Alma is right there. They've met the goals, so they are very ambitious. These goals, they are set at what the top 20% of the best achieve. So excellent. That's I hope that's helped sort of bring it a bit to life for you. So I'll hand back to you, Sharon. Thank you so much for sharing, Marcella. I really appreciate it.
Okay, all
Yep.
done.
Thank you so much, Marcella. Although I love the cat too. If anyone's got questions, please pop them in the chat too, if anyone's got questions for Marcella. But now I want to introduce Jaap Linssen, and Jaap's one of the founder of OrangeTrail, which is based in the Netherlands. And Jaap's got here on wearing two hats today, because he was one of the experts that we spoke with in the benchmarking report. So sharing tips on, adopting teams and maintaining teams, and, just even to things to give your team a kickstart. We've got some tips in the report. But OrangeTrail itself obviously practices what they preach, because OrangeTrail had 4 teams in the top 200 out of the 100,000 we benchmarked. What was really interesting when I spoke with Jaap is those 4 teams just happened to be the 4 projects that OrangeTrail was working on during that 3-month period. So I know when we spoke, Jaap, you were saying, well, if it was a different, if we benchmarked right now, whatever projects he'd be working on, it'd be those 4 teams as well. So really impressive. Jaap, I'm going to hand over to you, and Jaap's going to give you some tips for success, as you can see there, but also share a little bit of the team's journey that you guys do at OrangeTrail, as I said, practicing what you preach.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. And so start off, I think you guys did a fantastic job with the report. I was really impressed, and I'm honored to be recognized as a high-performing team in that sense. And it's nice to sort of have that recognition, because we say so that we do this, but it's somebody else telling you that you're actually doing it is a nice principle. So thanks for that. Yeah, what I want to do with you guys is to just give you some 4 practical tips, or 4 tips that we have, but really take you, and those will be the next slides that will be coming, into how we work and how that dynamic is created really. And I think so. The first 4 tips to start off with that is working out loud is really the game-changing principle that we're looking at right now. I think working out loud is, to me, it's similar as this whole agile wave that went through the workplace. This is, in my mind, this is really going to be the big game changer. And that's what companies, if they're really interested in boosting productivity with these tools that are out there, that's what they should focus on. And that brings me to the second point. They don't. Basically, what happens is a fool with a tool is still a fool. And this sounds harsh, but it also sounds nice because it rhymes. But what I'm trying to say there is that most companies actually, they focus on replacing some piece of technology. A lot of companies out there have basically introduced Teams as a migration from Skype. So then it becomes a meeting platform. You see, we're going to reduce email, and you guys said that as well. What are people going to do? They're going to chat. And this is a principle that we see everywhere, is people don't like to change. And if you really look at it, we're working in the same way as we did 100 years ago. And I'm going to show you a more detailed example of that. But we're still sitting and working on a typewriter. It has a screen, it has a keyboard, but it's still a typewriter. We're still typing. It's a virtual piece of paper. We're doing exactly the same thing as we're doing 100 years ago. And that's where we need to change. And that's why we're not progressing in that sense. We're still stuck in meetings and all of that. Sorry, I'm starting to go off on a rant. But what we see happening in the market is, and we call that feeding clients sugar. Clients say, just tell me how it works. And a lot of people that introduce this technology do exactly that. They just show them how it works. How do you set up a meeting? How do you do chat? How do you post a message? They don't explain how it will introduce or increase productivity. And yeah, so there's the key. Another part that's really important when you start to work on this is structure. And I'll show you some examples of non-structure and structure in some slides later on. But structure is key. If you don't structure your work well, stuff gets lost, people miss stuff, and it starts to become noisy. So structure is key, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. And then we talked a little bit about it, and the chat was full of it as well. But in my mind, chat is just for logistics. So I'm going to lunch. That was a good example. Stuff, you know, today I'm going to be working about these things, or I'm off to this client meeting. So logistical stuff. But as soon as it's connected to things you're working on the longer term, it should be in a threaded conversation, and it's working out loud instead of just a chat. And chat is just like email. It's where knowledge goes to die. It just flies away, and you'll never find it. So go easy on the chat and go on the thread. So the next slide that I'll talk, what I'm showing you, is an example actually of us still working, in an old-fashioned way. And this is what we call the library concept. And people like libraries. We've had libraries 30,000 years ago. We put clay tablets in them back then. That's progressed to paper, so we could have more in the library, and it's progressed to digital, and we could have even more. And the thing you see on the left is what a lot of shared folders in companies look like. You know, there's project plan 0.1, 0.3, then Bob has a version, Willie has a version, then there at some point there's 3.0 final, 3.0 really final, and often there's also 3.0 really final Willie. Anyway, you know, you get the point. What's missing here is why and how these things change. What's the reason? What's the difference between Willie's version and Bob's version? That's not captured in most organizations. That flies up in the air in meetings, in emails, in chat, but it's lost. All that contextual information is lost to companies. And it's actually, everybody, when it talks about knowledge management, everybody talks about we need to capture tacit knowledge. That's exactly what's lost. And the reason for it is we work in this way. If you start to work out loud, which is the example on the right, you capture it, basically. So what happens on the right is Matan Tal starts a project, and he needs to create a business case. And he says, I'm going to create this business case. This is the reason why. And here's the document I'm going to be working in. And then as time progresses, other people contribute to the document. They call in each other. And this is how the document progresses. The nice thing is that at some point, when this document's finished, and at the bottom you can see a decision is made, somebody can read this thread and actually knows what's happened, why this document is there, and why this decision was made. And this is the big change in that sense that we should start to make. So this is a big game changer, and this is just one example, but there's more examples of how you should change the way you work. So how does this working out loud actually work in practice? So it's the same example as we just had, and what you do is you start on top with a description if you're responsible for a certain delivery, a deliverable, or a client, or a case, or an innovation, whatever. Your company is full of these topics. You start by describing what you want. If there's a document involved, you attach the document that people can then use to work on, put it in a shared space, and you call out the people that you want something from. And then this process starts, and as people work on it, this thing is updated and they say what they've done to the document.
And calling out, in talking like at mentioning people, at mentioning teams if need be, that type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so you pull in people to the conversation. That's a key thing as well to get conversations lively as well. An important thing to do when you're working out loud, which is point 4, is to close the loop. So if something's done, to make sure that something's done, and also if you ask people for contributions, to show what you've done with the contribution. And then the last point, number 5, is that if you work in this way, emails disappear. And the nice thing about this working out loud, this is, if you look at this is very clear. It's very clear how things happened. It's all linear and you can read it. If this would happen in email, it would have been 50 emails, reply to alls, people replying to each other. So you'd have lost complete overview of what was happening. And if you work out loud, it's very nice and clear. The other nice thing about doing it in this way is all of these types of things are generally talked about in meetings. But if you work out loud well, everybody's on board. So what happens is your agenda items on your meeting start to disappear and your meeting starts to become shorter if you work in this way. So the next slide will show you a little bit. I'm waiting for to see the next. Yep, there we go. There are tons of applications for working out loud, and this is just a couple of examples. So what you see here is an update to colleagues and collecting input on something. So Quinn is negotiating training improvements. You can co-create and review deliverables. We've talked about this in the previous slide as well. But Judith is creating an onboarding document for new colleagues, and she's inviting other people to contribute to it. But it's also very useful to build agendas for meetings. So what you see here is that you see in the title, you see the date of the meeting, and then you see links to other threaded conversations that are then agenda items. And what people do to prepare for the meetings, they click on the link, they see the thread, read it, and they're prepared. So what makes this happen is also that people come to meetings more prepared, but also very often, if they have an opinion about something that's on the agenda, they just put it in a response. So very often things that are on the agenda disappear before the meeting even happens. So the next slide is about the structure.
Yep, we've got a really good question come in from Andrew. Andrew, did you want to ask this yourself, just in relation to finishing the threads that you were, or what happens when the, closing off? Well, anyway, Andrew, do you want to jump in and ask the question?
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
It's just that, we have lots of threads. For example, if you have a Teams for a project, and you've got threads about how the project went and different discussions, when the project closes and you want to archive it, what happens is the documents, yes, you can archive them in another place, but what we're finding a problem is that within Teams, you cannot archive the chat. And you can copy it, you can screenshot it, but there isn't a mechanism to archive it or store that knowledge. Do you have that experience?
Yes, I have, but I think I'm not. What is the reason to archive? Why don't we just let it exist? If it's not lively anymore, it's not gonna be in your where you're working, and it's just gonna sit somewhere. What you can do in Teams is you can hide certain projects. So they'll just slip off your active screen at the moment, but they're still there, and that means you can still, if you search, you can still find them, and it's still there. I think it's something I guess the archiving thought comes from cleaning your desk that we did in the past. So you had all this stuff on your desk and you needed space to work. But what happens in the digital space is that these things, if you don't work on them, they sort of drop off your of your the space that you're working in. So I don't think you need to archive in that sense. I would just right click on the team, and you can hide it. And the same goes for channels. I have an example in the next slide. So for big clients, we keep one team for a client, and the projects roll on with channels. So we create new channels for projects, and we just hide the old ones, but they still exist. So my solution would be just forget about archiving it, and move on and hide them.
Does that not interfere with if you're doing a search, because you're going to have hundreds of? Would that have an impact on search? If you ever look for something, you'd get all this other spurious information that may not be related to current projects.
Yes, you would get if you search, but to me, I don't know. If I search, it's generally to find stuff in old projects, because I'm quite aware of the stuff that's going on in the projects that are running. It's generally if I'm looking for a PowerPoint presentation we did 2 years ago, that's sort of when I search. But yes, it is that would happen. So okay, if you search, you do get stuff that's older. And if that's an issue, then I guess you do want to clean up. But to be honest, I think that's actually nice to be able to find things that you did in the past. But yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, pleasure. Getting back on track. So disciplinary structure and what you see here are two examples, and what you see on the left side is something we see a lot at people that start off with teams. They just dump documents in there with a lot of descriptions, and the whole what we call activity stream is just fragmentation of things that people just dump in there. And it's used more in a manner of chat than it is in a structured way of working. And what you see on the right is actually, in this case, I've even beefed up the heading a little bit by using the announcement feature. But you can really, if you work in this way and use titles well for the threads, you really start to have a nice overview of all the key things, the key threads that are in there. And it starts to become really easy to follow this. So structure your threads properly, have good titles that describe what's in them. And you can even use the announcement to make it even bigger and bolder and more colorful. So this is the structure. Then the other part about structure is the channels. The first thing to say about channels is what we tend to do is if we have a project, we sort of create a channel per work stream. So and those can be big deliverables or workshops or whatever. But so the key big things that we're working on get their own channel. So that's the first thing that we do. Something that I've put in this slide is practical considerations when things start to move on. What I just mentioned as well is what you see on top is that, for example, for our client Friesland Campina, we do multiple projects. So what you see here is most of the channels that we have for them. So you see that we did a project in 2019 about Microsoft Teams, and you see the channels for that. And then you see that 2 years later, we're launching Yammer at this company, and that has 4 work streams. So this is how we, for example, roll on with the channels within a certain client setting. So this is a way you can progress without creating a new team every time for a client. Something we also do is for our smaller projects, we don't want to create a teams per, if we do a workshop for one company, we don't want to create a whole team for that one workshop. So what we have is also a teams, and it's called one channel projects. And what you see here are 3 of the small projects that we're working on right now in the company. And the whole project is one channel, and the threads will contain the stuff that's happening in there. So that's a way to work with the different sizes of the projects that you'll be working in, and if they're longer or shorter types of projects. But this is last one.
Yes, many. We probably just considering time. I know people probably got to go somewhere to go. So I might just. Is there a last slide you want to show before we?
So the very last. So when I look at SWOOP, it's the network side. Something that we see, you see 2 projects that are happening in our company right now, and the one at the bottom right is a project, and I've taken the people out, that has a problem, and you see the problems in the right or the left bottom corner. There's somebody that's not really connected. So this is the way that I actually look at how teams are doing, and the one at the top right is a team that is very healthy. You see a core team of 2 people that are doing most of the work driving it. You see them very connected, and then you see top right and middle bottom. Those are 2 designers. So they're less connected, but they're connected. This is fine. I'm connected to some extent. And then you see a person that's just joined the team on the bottom right. So she's just getting involved in it. So this is a team that is healthy. So you can very quickly, using this type of network vision, look at how the team is performing and if people are actually part of what's happening in the team. So this is a little example of how I use SWOOP. That's
This is fabulous, and I love the structures, and I think we can all learn so much. I saw Marcella nodding away to a lot of it. So I'm sorry that we've run out of time, everyone, but I hope you've all managed to download our benchmarking report. If not, the link's in the chat, and just check on that QR code. And Kai, if you can just move to the next screen, I want to invite all of you in your organisations, if you would like to uncover your top performing teams, if you scan on this code, or if you go to swoopanalytics.com, just click on a trial for free. And Laurie, actually, I think you were saying if you do it in the next month, Laurie will identify the top 10 teams for you. Is that correct?
Yes. So if you get in quickly, we can run the same algorithms over yours, and you can find out who your top 10 teams are. And I have to say that all of the people that we've spoken to, they couldn't really guess which was their best team. They could understand it after we told them, but it is something that SWOOP actually uniquely identifies for you. So that's a very quick win, I think, for you. And of course, once you know who the best teams are, that's who you start to amplify and promote to the rest of the organisation. Follow our example.
So thank you, Laurie. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Marcella. And thank you, Lab. Thank you so much for participating, and for all the participants and joining in, and all the wonderful questions we've had in the chat. Thank you so much, and we'll see you out there somewhere online. Thank you.